First contact in crisis. The crystalline spires of Nexer Prime's capital city no longer sparkled in the twin suns' light. Where once they had shimmered with prismatic brilliance, now they stood dulled, their surfaces clouded by the same microscopic invader that was claiming its inhabitants. Medical centers overflowed with the sick, their normally iridescent skin turned ashen gray. High healer Zira stood at her observation window, her forearms pressed against the transparent barrier as she watched another transport arrive with more patients. Her inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme distress among her people. The plague had first appeared 3 cycles ago in the outer colonies. By the time it reached the capital, a third of the population showed symptoms. Honored healer, her assistant's voice quavered behind her. The council awaits your report. Zyra turned, her ceremonial robes barely stirring in the sterile air. Tell them I bring only grief. Our latest treatment protocols have failed. The virus, it adapts faster than anything we've ever encountered. The council chamber was eerily empty when she arrived. Most members attended via hologram, their translucent forms flickering in their designated spaces. Those physically present wore protective suits, though they all knew if the virus wanted to breach their defenses, it would find a way. It always did. High healer, first speaker Malin's voice resonated through the chamber. Your findings. The virus continues to evolve. Zyra projected the latest data into the center of the room. It's not just attacking our bodies anymore. It's learning. Each new strain shows signs of increasing intelligence. This is no natural pathogen. Murmurs rippled through the assembled council. Are you suggesting? This was engineered, Zyra confirmed. And whoever created it understood our biology at a fundamental level. We're not just fighting a disease, we're fighting someone's weapon. The silence that followed felt heavier than a neutron star. The Nexarians were peaceful explorers and scientists, their civilization built on the pursuit of knowledge and understanding. The idea that someone would deliberately create this plague was almost incomprehensible to them. We've detected a new signal, one of the younger council members spoke up. From an unexplored sector of space, the civilization appears to have just achieved faster than light travel. We are in no position to make first contact, another council member objected. Our people are dying. These beings, Zyra studied the data streaming across her neural interface. Their world is called Earth. They're fascinating. Their medical science is primitive compared to ours, but their approach to problem solving is unlike anything I've ever seen. They've survived countless plagues of their own, and each time they've emerged stronger. First speaker Malin's form flickered as he leaned forward. You're not suggesting. I am. Zyra's inner eyelids steadied for the first time in days. We send them a distress signal. Ask for their help. They've barely left their solar system. The objection came from multiple council members at once. Exactly. Zyra projected new data. Records of human history their long-range probes had collected. Look at what they've accomplished in just a few centuries of industrial development. They're adaptable, innovative, and most importantly, they have a history of helping others even at great cost to themselves. They're also violent, unpredictable, another council member warned. Their history is filled with conflict. Perhaps that's exactly what we need, Zyra said softly. We've approached this plague like scientists. Maybe we need warriors. The debate raged for hours, but in the end, desperation won out over caution. The signal was sent, a detailed technical package that would allow the humans to understand their plight and calculate a course to Nexer Prime. What no one expected was the response they received less than an Earth day later. We're coming. Hold on. The message was simple, direct, and carried something the Nexarians had almost lost: hope. As Zyra returned to her medical center, she watched the first stars appear in the evening sky. Somewhere out there, a species that had just learned to break the light barrier was preparing to cross half a galaxy to help people they'd never met. Hurry, she whispered to the stars. Please hurry. In her isolation ward, another 100 patients had arrived. Their skin was graying faster now. the virus accelerating its assault. She placed her hand against the quarantine field, watching her people suffer. The humans would come. They had to. Because for the first time in their history, the Nexarians couldn't save themselves. They needed something beyond their science, beyond their understanding of the universe. They needed humanity's greatest weapon, the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The human solution. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the United Earth Council, her heart racing, but her voice steady. The holographic display behind her showed the devastating data from the Nexarian distress signal. The chamber was packed. Representatives from every major nation and scientific institution on Earth had assembled within hours of the signal's arrival. Their medical technology is centuries ahead of ours, she acknowledged, pacing the floor. But that's exactly why we might succeed where they failed. Sometimes you need fresh eyes on a problem. Eyes that aren't constrained by advanced knowledge. Admiral James Rodriguez, the newly appointed commander of Earth's first deep space rescue mission, stood beside her. The Stellar Dawn can be ready in 48 hours. We've already begun loading medical equipment and retrofitting the research labs. This is insane. The Chinese representative interrupted. We've barely tested our FTL drives beyond the Centauri system. Now we're proposing to send our flagship across half the galaxy. Sarah pulled up new data. Look at these viral patterns. The Nexarian plague isn't just killing them, it's evolving. It's showing signs of artificial intelligence at a molecular level. Whoever engineered this virus isn't just trying to eliminate a species, they're testing a weapon. Today it's the Nexarians, tomorrow. The room fell silent. The implication was clear. Earth couldn't afford to ignore this threat. The Nexarians chose us for a reason, Sarah continued. They've been watching us. They know our history. Humans have faced plagues before, and we've always found a way. Not because we had the best technology, but because we never stopped trying, never stopped looking for answers in unexpected places. The approval came within hours. As Sarah walked through the Stellar Dawn's medical bay, now crammed with equipment both cutting-edge and surprisingly primitive, she couldn't help but smile at the organized chaos. Researchers from every major Earth institute worked alongside military personnel, preparing for departure. Dr. Marcus Wong, her chief virologist, was carefully packing what looked like ordinary soil samples. You really think dirt might help us fight an advanced alien virus? Some of our most effective antibiotics came from soil bacteria, Sarah replied. The Nexarians would never think to look there. They've been spacefaring so long, they've lost touch with their planet's primitive defenses. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. The ship's launch was witnessed by billions. The Stellar Dawn, humanity's first true starship, carrying Earth's best hopes, and most importantly, its determination, into the unknown. The journey pushed the ship's experimental FTL drive to its limits. Sarah spent the time studying the Nexarian data, her mind racing with possibilities. They were a fascinating species, their biology based on crystalline structures rather than carbon, their medical science focused on energy manipulation and quantum healing. They're too advanced, she mused one night, sharing coffee with Admiral Rodriguez in the observation deck. They're looking for complex solutions because that's how they think. But viruses are old. They're primitive. Maybe that's why this one's winning. The first sight of Nexar Prime took their breath away. The crystalline cities should have been beautiful, but now they were clouded, dimmed by the microscopic invader killing their creators. As the Stellar Dawn entered orbit, they received updated statistics. Half the population was now infected. The landing was met with a mixture of hope and skepticism. High Healer Zura, her once vibrant skin now showing the first signs of gray, led the Earth delegation through their primary medical facility. Your methods are unusual, she observed, watching Sarah's team set up their equipment. The humans had brought everything from electron microscopes to simple Petri dishes. Sometimes the best solutions are the simple ones, Sarah replied, carefully culturing samples of the virus. Your people have been fighting this plague with energy fields and quantum manipulation, but sometimes you need to fight fire with fire, or in this case, fight life with life. The Nexarian medical staff watched in bewilderment as the humans began their work, while the alien doctors manipulated quantum fields and tried to decode the virus's artificial intelligence. Sarah's team went back to basics. They studied how the virus behaved in different environments, exposed it to various Earth bacteria, and looked for weaknesses in its basic structure. It's not just about finding a cure, Sarah explained to Zura late one night. It's about understanding your enemy. This virus, it's too perfect, too adaptable. But everything has a weakness, even perfection. As she watched her team work, Sarah felt the weight of two civilizations on her shoulders. But there was something else too, a fierce determination that had driven humanity from its first steps out of Africa to its first steps among the stars. They would find a way. They had to. Because that's what humans did best. They faced the impossible, and they found a way to make it possible. Breaking point. The discovery came at 3 a.m. Earth time, when Dr. Marcus Wong's hands started shaking so badly he dropped his sample container. Sarah rushed to his station, expecting the worst. Instead, she found him staring at his monitor with a mixture of horror and revelation. "Look at this," he whispered, pulling up the molecular analysis. "We've been so focused on fighting the virus, we never asked why it was designed this way." The holographic display showed the virus's structure rotating slowly in the air. Sarah's breath caught as she saw what Marcus had discovered. Within the virus's genetic code was an embedded pattern, too precise to be natural, too complex to be accidental. "It's not just a weapon," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "It's a message." The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. While half the human team continued working on treatment protocols, Sarah and Marcus worked with Nexarian cryptographers to decode the pattern hidden in the virus's DNA. When they finally broke it, the message sent chills through both human and Nexarian alike. "This is just the beginning. Surrender or be cleansed." High Healer Zura, now confined to a medical pod as the virus progressed through her system, listened to their report with dimming eyes. "The Wraith Collective," she breathed. "We should have known." Admiral Rodriguez leaned forward. "You know who did this?" "We thought they were myths," Zira explained, her voice weakening. "Stories to frighten children. An ancient race that believes only the strong deserve to survive. They test emerging civilizations with engineered plagues. Those who survive are deemed worthy. Those who don't are cleansed," Sarah finished. The implications were staggering. How many civilizations? If the stories are true, hundreds, maybe thousands. Zira's crystalline skin was almost completely gray now. "We were peaceful, too peaceful. They saw us as weak." The virus chose that moment to demonstrate its artificial intelligence. Across the medical facility, alarms began blaring. The infection rate suddenly spiked, as if the pathogen knew it had been discovered and was accelerating its attack. "It's mutating faster than ever," Marcus reported, his fingers flying over his console. "Everything we've tried, every potential treatment. It's adapting before we can implement them." Sarah watched in helpless fury as more Nexarians succumbed to the accelerated virus. Their best lead yet, and it seemed to have only made things worse. The weight of failure pressed down on her, threatening to crush her spirit. Then she saw something that made her heart stop. In one of the primitive Petri dishes they'd been using to study the virus, a small patch of the sample remained clear. Around it, a colony of simple Earth bacteria continued to thrive, completely untouched by the advanced alien pathogen. "Marcus," she called out, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "Look at this. What did you put in this dish?" He checked his logs. That's from the soil samples. Basic Streptomyces bacteria. The kind that gave us our first antibiotics. But it shouldn't matter. This virus is way too advanced to be affected by." "Exactly," Sarah interrupted. "It's too advanced. All this time, We've been trying to fight it with our most sophisticated weapons. But what if that's exactly what it expects? What if the answer isn't in our advanced medicine at all? She turned to the Nexarian medical team, their faces showing varying degrees of skepticism and desperate hope. Your civilization has evolved beyond your planet's primitive defenses. But Earth is still wild. Our bacteria, our viruses, they're still fighting the same wars they fought for billions of years. Admiral Rodriguez caught on first. You want to fight a high-tech virus with dirt. Not just dirt. Sarah's eyes were blazing now. 4 billion years of evolutionary warfare, while your people were mastering quantum healing. She addressed the Nexarian doctors. Earth's smallest organisms were locked in an endless arms race. They developed weapons we're only beginning to understand. But even as hope flickered to life, the virus struck again. 3 more medical centers reported critical failures. The force fields containing the worst cases began to flicker as the virus somehow interfered with their power systems. Zyra's voice came weakly from her pod. If you have a plan, Dr. Chen, implement it quickly. We're running out of time. Sarah looked at her team, then at the dying Nexarians around them. They had one chance at this. If she was wrong, she wouldn't just fail to save the Nexarians. She might inadvertently help the virus destroy them faster. But that was the difference between humans and the Wraith Collective, where they saw weakness in taking risks. Humanity saw strength in daring to try, even in the face of impossible odds. Begin the protocol, she ordered. All of it. Every strain of defensive bacteria we brought. Every primitive organism that survived Earth's worst plagues. Let's show this advanced virus what 4 billion years of evolution can do. As her team rushed to work, Sarah placed her hand against Zyra's pod. Hold on, she whispered. The answer was never in the stars. It was in the dirt beneath our feet all along. The battle for Nexar Prime was about to enter its final phase, and humanity was about to prove that sometimes the oldest weapons were the best weapons of all. Turning the tide. The medical bay had become a battlefield, but the combatants were too small to see with the naked eye. Within sealed containment units, Earth's ancient bacterial warriors engaged the advanced alien virus in microscopic combat. Sarah and her team worked tirelessly, introducing different combinations of Earth's most resilient microorganisms. Look at this, Marcus called out, his exhaustion forgotten as he stared at the latest results. On his screen, a time-lapse showed Earth bacteria not just surviving the virus's attacks, but actively breaking it down. The streptomyces isn't just resistant, it's hunting the virus. Sarah leaned in, her eyes wide. It's not just hunting, it's learning. Every time the virus adapts, the bacteria adapt faster. 4 billion years of evolutionary warfare versus artificial intelligence. And nature is winning. But their excitement was short-lived. Alarms blared through the facility as Zyra's vital signs began to crash. The High Healer's crystalline form had turned almost completely gray, the virus's artificial intelligence launching a final devastating assault on her system. We don't have time for more tests, Sarah decided, her jaw set. We need to scale this up. Now. Admiral Rodriguez stepped forward. The risks are better than certain death, Sarah finished. She turned to the Nexarian medical team. We need to modify your atmospheric processors. Instead of trying to filter out the virus, we're going to introduce our bacteria throughout the entire city. The Nexarian doctors looked at each other in alarm. One spoke up. You want to fill our air with Earth organisms. The potential complications will have to be dealt with later, Sarah cut in. Right now, your people are dying. We have a weapon that works. We just need to deploy it on a massive scale. Time seemed to blur as they worked. The human engineering team, led by Rodriguez, modified the massive atmospheric processors while Sarah's team prepared enough bacterial samples to treat an entire city. They worked through exhaustion, through doubt, through fear, driven by the knowledge that every minute meant more lives lost. Finally, everything was ready. Sarah stood before the control panel, her hand hovering over the activation sequence. Around her, both humans and Nexarians held their breath. This would either save their civilization or become the biggest mistake in medical history. "Do it," came a weak voice. Zira, barely conscious in her pod, had managed to raise her hand. "We trust you." Sarah pressed the sequence. Throughout the city, modified atmospheric processors hummed to life. Microscopic Earth organisms, the products of billions of years of evolution, were released into the air. Through advanced Nexarian air circulation systems, they spread rapidly, seeking out their engineered adversary. For several tense hours, nothing seemed to change. Then, gradually, monitors began showing something remarkable. Where the Earth bacteria encountered the virus, they didn't just fight it. They consumed it, using its advanced structure as fuel to multiply faster. The virus's intelligence is working against it, Marcus realized, watching the data stream in. It keeps trying to adapt, to become more complex. But that just makes it a better food source for our bacteria. The more it evolves, the more vulnerable it becomes. Sarah finished. It's so focused on advancing that it forgot the most basic rule of survival. Sometimes simpler is better. The change in infected patients was gradual at first, then accelerated. The gray tinge began to fade from their crystalline skin. Vital signs stabilized. In her pod, Zyra's eyes brightened for the first time in days. But the real miracle was happening on a microscopic level. The Earth bacteria weren't just destroying the virus. They were teaching the Nexarians' own biological defenses how to fight back. Like veteran warriors training new recruits, the primitive Earth organisms were showing the Nexarians' advanced immune systems how to engage in microscopic warfare. "This is unprecedented," one of the Nexarian doctors exclaimed, watching the process through their quantum imaging systems. "Your organisms are communicating with our biology, teaching it, strengthening it." Sarah smiled tiredly. "That's the thing about life on Earth. We never fight alone. Every organism, from the smallest bacteria to the largest animal, knows that survival sometimes means working together." As the hours passed, the evidence became undeniable. The virus was losing. In its drive to become ever more advanced, it had become vulnerable to the most basic forms of life, organisms that had spent billions of years learning to survive against all odds. Reports began coming in from across the city, then from other cities as the treatment spread. The plague was retreating. The Nexarians were going to survive. Sarah finally allowed herself to sink into a chair, exhaustion overtaking her. Admiral Rodriguez placed a hand on her shoulder. "Dr. Chen, I think you just rewrote the book on interstellar medicine." She shook her head. "No, we just reminded everyone that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best solutions. The Wraith Collective thought they could engineer the perfect weapon, but they forgot something important." "What's that?" Marcus asked, looking up from his data. "You can't improve on 4 billion years of evolution." Earth's bacteria weren't just fighting this virus. They were fighting for every organism that ever lived or died on our planet. That's a power no artificial intelligence can match. As the city's crystal spires began to regain their shine, Sarah watched Zira emerge from her pod, fully recovered. The high healer's eyes met hers, and in that moment, both knew that this was more than just a medical victory. It was proof that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in advancing beyond nature, but in remembering where you came from, and that the simplest solutions could overcome the most complex problems. The Wraith Collective had tried to cleanse a civilization they deemed too weak to survive. Instead, they had brought together two species who would now face the future stronger than ever, not despite their differences, but because of them. Legacy of Hope. 3 months after the defeat of the virus, Nexar Prime had transformed. The crystalline cities sparkled once again, but they were different now. Through the transparent walls of the Grand Council chamber, one could see patches of earth gardens growing alongside the native crystal formations, a living memorial to the organisms that had saved their world. High Healer Zira stood before the assembled council, her skin now shimmering with unprecedented vibrancy. The Earth bacteria hadn't just saved the Nexarians, they had changed them, making their biological defenses stronger than ever before. The Wraith Collective made a critical error, she announced, her voice carrying through the chamber. They assumed that advancement meant abandoning our origins. Humanity showed us that true strength comes from remembering where we came from. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the audience alongside Admiral Rodriguez and her team, still amazed by how events had unfolded. The Nexarians hadn't just recovered, they had evolved. Their bodies now hosted colonies of Earth bacteria, living in perfect symbiosis with their crystalline biology. It was an unprecedented fusion of the primitive and the advanced. We've received reports from 12 other civilizations, First Speaker Malon announced. The Wraith Collective has tested them all with similar weapons. None survived. Until now. What humanity has given us isn't just a cure, it's a shield against future attacks. Sarah stepped forward when called, addressing the council. The bacteria we introduced continue to evolve, adapting to your biology. They're creating defenses we never imagined possible, but more importantly, they've taught your people something invaluable. That sometimes the past holds the key to the future, Zira finished, her eyes gleaming. The council session concluded with a historic announcement. The Nexarians were establishing Earth as their primary medical research partner. Together, they would explore the intersection of advanced quantum healing and Earth's evolutionary defenses. But there was something else too, something that made the Wraith Collective's attempt to destroy them backfire spectacularly. We've analyzed the virus's communication patterns, Marcus reported during the final briefing. We can trace them back to their source. The Wraith Collective didn't just fail to destroy the Nexarians, they revealed their location. Admiral Rodriguez smiled grimly. And now humanity and the Nexarians have a common cause. They wanted to test our strength. Well, they're about to learn what happens when you unite two civilizations that refuse to be bullied. As the stellar dawn prepared for its journey home, Sarah stood with Zira in one of the new Earth gardens. Around them, crystal formations reflected sunlight onto beds of terrestrial plants, creating rainbow patterns that danced across the ground. You know what I find most remarkable? Zira mused, watching a group of young Nexarians learning about Earth biology. The Wraith Collective sought to prove we were too weak to survive. Instead, they proved that true strength lies in being willing to learn from others. Sarah nodded, touching one of the crystal formations. They thought advancement meant leaving everything behind. But Earth's history shows that the most successful species are the ones that adapt while remembering their roots. And now? Zira asked, though she already knew the answer. Now we face the future together. Earth's resilience combined with Nexarian technology. They wanted to cleanse the galaxy of what they saw as weakness. Instead, they created the strongest alliance they could have imagined. As the twin suns set over Nexar Prime, their light caught the crystal spires and the Earth gardens in equal measure, creating a display of color and life that had never been seen before in the galaxy. It was beautiful, but it was more than that. It was a promise that no matter what threats emerged from the darkness between the stars, they would face them together. The Wraith Collective had tried to prove that only the strong survive. Instead, they had proven that the strongest survival strategy of all was working together, combining the wisdom of the past with the promise of the future. The humans prepared to return to Earth, but this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Humanity had taken its first steps into the galactic community, not through conquest or technological superiority, but through their willingness to help, their ability to think differently, and their understanding that strength comes in many forms. As the stellar dawn lifted off, carrying with it treaties of alliance and plans for future cooperation, Sarah watched the crystalline cities recede below them. Somewhere out there, the Wraith Collective was planning their next test, but they would soon learn that they had created something they never intended, a union of civilizations that combined the best of the old and the new, the primitive and the advanced. They had wanted to cleanse the galaxy of weakness. Instead, they had forged an alliance that would change it forever. And it had all started with a distress signal, a ship full of determined humans, and the simple bacteria they had brought from their homeworld, proving that sometimes the greatest solutions come not from advancing beyond nature, but from remembering its lessons. The stars beckoned ahead of them, full of both promise and challenge. But now, no civilization would have to face those challenges alone.